editing process, you mentioned like stacking. What other processes do you have to do to make it like stand out? Because I'm not sure if the image that you post like on Instagram has the colors. Is the color already the color that you photograph, or do you add color or saturation to it to make it pop out even more? Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. You know, a lot of people ask, you know, are those colors real? Does it really look like that? And, you know, the answer is most of the time, it's hard to say. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Like, for example, the Hubble Space Telescope, most of the photos that you see taken from the Hubble, they use a series of filters, and they use that for scientific reasons, but basically it creates what's called a false color image. So they're basically mapping what's normally red to be like blue, and then what's normally green to be like red, and things like that. So it comes out looking, you know, the colors don't really look as true to life as they are. For me, I do try to I keep the natural colors the way they are. But if I were to leave everything like untouched in terms of like saturation and brightness and everything like that, it would look pretty underwhelming as an image, in my opinion. So I try to boost those natural details without getting so far gone that it's unrealistic. So the answer is almost yes and no. Like I do try to add some saturation and brightness to my images to make them pop more. But I also try to retain the natural colors and things like that in my astro photos. So it's not, you know, breaking reality in a way.
Yeah.
And those things, you know, these objects that I'm photographing, like nebulae and whatnot, if you were to like go fly in space and be up close to them and see them with your own eyes, you know, they would look that bright and that colorful. It's just we're, you know, looking through many layers of atmosphere here on Earth and other things that kind of obscure the view. So
the light has to travel back like from where the nebula is and to the telescope and then back to our eyes. So it probably loses some of its luminosity in the process there.
Totally. So, and I guess just so, I'll, if it's okay, I'll just run through quickly, like what the process of post-processing is for astrophotography, because I think a lot of people might be interested in that too.
Yeah.
So essentially I was saying before, you know, the idea is you want to take multiple exposures so that you're able to stack them all on top of each other. And what that does is that reduces the noise in the image. You know, if you ever took a night photo, even on just your phone, you'll notice that it's really grainy most of the time because there's not a lot of light going on. Well, that is like amplified to like times 100 when you're talking about deep sky objects like galaxies. So you pretty much need to do this image stacking to get a good result. And then what we do from there is you get the stacked image, which is spit out from software. Like there's a software called Deep Sky Stacker. It's a really common one. And that can generate a stacked image. And then from there, you take that into Photoshop or some other photo editing application. And the stacked image almost always comes out completely black. It's like, wait, did I do everything right? Like, like I'm kind of worried. Like I spent all this time photographing this object for like 6 hours and my image is black. But it's honestly, it's just the detail is hiding in the blackness, and you can take like your levels or your curves adjustment tools in Photoshop and boost up the brightness. And eventually you'll start to see an image, and then it's like, oh wow,
there it is.
Like there's a galaxy coming out of the blackness. It's like, you know, it's kind of eerie looking in a way. Like
all the work paid off right there.
Yeah, exactly. All the work paid off. And then from there, you know, I just, like I said, do the brightness and saturation and other minor details, like trying to get rid of gradients in the image. And there's a lot that goes into it, but that is the gist in a nutshell. It's not very hard, especially if you already have Photoshop. You can download free data from Hubble Space Telescope or other places, other free astrophotography data sources. And you can just practice editing astro images for yourself at home.
Yeah.
A lot of people do that just for fun. And I think that's really cool too. You don't always have to be out roughing it like me in the desert. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Also, another thing I was curious about, when you're looking for these galaxies or nebula, when you go to a place and try to photograph these, how can you tell like where it is in space? Is there a program that has all the locations, or do you have to find it by yourself? How's that?
That's a great question. So thankfully, my mount that I have, so just for those who don't know, the mount is basically a tripod, a heavy duty tripod with like a motorized head on it. And then my telescope and camera sits on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
But the mount, that's the piece of equipment that tracks the Earth's rotation, right? So that has motors built in and it's electronic and everything. So fortunately, once I get it all calibrated and polar aligned and all these things, what I do is there's like a little remote control that comes with the mount, and you just say, oh, go to the Orion Nebula, and you hit enter, and then your whole telescope and mount goes and it like starts pointing and slewing over towards the target. And most of the time it points right at it, which thankfully is really nice, because a lot of these objects, I would say like 95% of these objects you can't see with your naked eye. So you really have to kind of guess. You're like, I'm often like looking at the stars around the object that I'm trying to photograph. And I'm like, do these line up with, what I'm seeing on my camera and everything? So, and then I can do like, what I do is I do like a series of short exposures. So I'll do like a 10-second or 30 seconds with the gain, the ISO cranked all the way up. And then that's kind of how I can see, oh, there's that little faint blob there. I'm at the right place. So kind of hard to find objects sometimes, but that's how you do it. And thankfully, I have a tracking mount that points things automatically. Not everyone has that luxury. So
that's good that it has that, because if you're and I think it's because like other people have photographed it before, so they programmed it in there, so it's better, and it's a time saving thing, luxury basically to have that. So
yeah, definitely. It's kind of essential when you're shooting at, like, the longer the focal length of your telescope or camera lens, the smaller of a straw you're looking through at the sky, right? So you have to really use a go-to equatorial mount in that case, which is what I was talking about. So yeah.
And when you photograph a particular object in space, are you trying to focus on it specifically, or are you trying to take a broad image and then in post processing like zoom into that image, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's a good question. With telescopes, telescopes, unlike camera lenses, they don't zoom.
Mm-hmm.
They're all stuck at the same focal length, and they're stuck at the same aperture too. So if you're using a camera lens, you have the luxury of being able to, like, oh yeah, I just want to zoom in on this one particular spot. But with the telescope, you're like, what you see is what you get, So yeah, generally I normally do a good amount of cropping, but sometimes I think half the battle of taking astrophotography images and planning your session is something called framing. And that's really what you're just talking about, is like, okay, like, am I intending to crop in a bit here and just get this galaxy close up? Or am I hoping to do a pulled back kind of wide field of view and capture everything that my telescope is seeing, but like arrange it or compose it in a way that I'm capturing maybe multiple objects in the same field of view? So like my most recent image I just posted the other day is a galaxy chain. So it's a chain of all these different galaxies, and there's a ton of them in a row. It's crazy. Like, like I never thought I would be saying like, oh yeah, I just captured like 100 galaxies in this photograph, but here I am. And anyway, so for that image, it was beneficial to stay wide and use the telescope's whole field of view to capture all of the galaxies I could, versus just zooming in on one. Because I think it's really cool just to see them all strung together.
Yeah, that's crazy. 100 galaxies in one picture. That's wild.
Yeah, I know. It's surreal. But yeah, those are the things that are possible with astrophotography.